Hello everyone, welcome to you all on my YouTube channel. So today we are going to study about the concept of delegated legislation. The concept of delegated legislation in this video will be discussed step by step, and the basic outline of the lecture will be that first we will discuss the delegated legislation as a concept, and then we will discuss its ambit, and then we will discuss the why delegated legislation is needed, and lastly we will discuss delegated legislation in India. So starting with the concept delegated legislation, law made powers exercised by an executive authority through the powers given to them by enabling act is known as delegated legislation. In other words, we can say that minor law-making power conferred by legislature to the executive is called the delegated legislation. This concept is also known as or referred to as ancillary, subordinate or administrative legislation, or as quasi-legislation also. We will discuss its ambit. The second point, though the executive has discretionary powers, this power is to be exercised in aid of the legislative policy of the act and cannot travel beyond it or run counter to it, and certainly cannot change the essential features, the identity, structure or the policy of the act. Now we will understand why delegated legislation is needed and how it is processed. In a leading case of Hamdard Dawakhana versus Union of India, it was said that delegated legislation is needed to fulfill in the details to carry out and subserve the purpose of legislation. First point is to deal with the emergencies. In this point, it is mentioned that some unanticipated emergency comes while making policies and doing legislation. So to deal with that, we need some delegated legislation to transfer or give some executive work to the subordinates. Second one is that Parliament has no time to fill the complicated and technical matters. In certain cases, when the technical expertise or more complex technical nature work is needed, then we use the delegated legislation to fulfill that work, fulfill the technicalities of that work. Third one is the Parliament can deal with policy but cannot deal with the quantity or quality of the law. See, the Parliament works on policy, debate and discussion goes on in Parliament over a particular policy so that the pros and cons of the policy can be found out and to be corrected and made in conformity with the societal norms and according to the and for the welfare of the society. Third one is that technical matters are best handled by the expert through delegated legislation. The opinion of experts in any matter is always open. Opinion of expert are very important and very needful input to any legislation or any policy, because each and every member of the Parliament will not be very much expert in certain fields, so they need the expert opinion. Fifth one is the practice of delegated legislation introduce the flexibility in law. In this, it is discussed that law is a very dynamic thing. It changes according to the time and according to the societal norms and behavior. So the delegated legislation introduce flexibility in the lawmaking process. And last one is the delegated legislation in India. In view of the written constitution, delegated legislation cannot be unlimited. The powers that is delegated, the powers that is delegated cannot work beyond the given extent, and that extent is to be decided by the legislature or the constitution itself. Second one is that delegated legislation must always be in conformity to the basic structure and feature of the constitution, as well as in ambit which is given for the delegated legislation by the corresponding legislation. This point is very important, as in our constitution also it is given in Article 13 that any legislation or any provisions that is not consistent with the provisions of the constitution will be considered null and void. So this was the concept of delegated legislation. We will study our next topic in another video. So thanks for listening. Thank you.